Despite the fact that Russia has not abandoned its ambitions to invade Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine has been going on for several months now, and as a result, we are beginning to wonder what will occur in Ukraine once the conflict has concluded. How the next few months of the war play out will determine the course of action that Ukraine takes once it is no longer at war. Whether they will put an end to this conflict by winning it or by raising the white flag to surrender is something that will be decided by the actions that they take and the choices they will make in the future. The future of Ukraine may be split down into two potential outcomes, as well as one nightmare scenario that is far more terrifying than it initially appears. The first is that the Russian forces are able to recover from their setbacks and push the many advantages they now enjoy, seriously pressuring the Ukrainian armed forces. As a result, the president of Ukraine was similarly left with few viable options. Once he realizes that continuing to fight is pointless, he can either give up or surrender, but it can surely cost him the presidency if he does it. Further resistance would be pointless in Zelensky's eyes, wasting the lives of his men, but fortunately, this appears to be utterly impossible. Ukraine, on the other hand, can buy some time by using their territories to fortify their defenses against the enemy. Action taken by the Russians during their conflict with Germany. Ukraine can respond in other areas if it can draw Russian forces far into Ukrainian territory, which will strain their supply lines. Russia has suffered heavy casualties during the battle, and their soldiers lack the momentum to threaten Zelensky with an early surrender. President Zelensky's other option is to continue fighting Russia to a sluggish and ultimately futile halt. This means that progress on the front lines will be slow and steady, with Russian forces making very slight gains over time. Actually, it appears to be the case at the moment, with Russia taking heavy losses and making just marginal gains. Ukraine is also overseeing its own modest progress, so we are not quite there at this stage. If it becomes apparent, however, that Ukraine cannot beat Russia militarily, Zelensky will have to resort to option 2, negotiating a peace with special circumstances with Russia, which would require Ukraine to yield a significant amount of territory to Russia. Despite Putin's claims that he has no intention of occupying Ukraine, Russia has already made some parts of Ukraine its own by erecting Russian-language signs and introducing the ruble as legal tender. This makes it highly unlikely that Ukraine will be able to completely expel Russian forces from its territory. The West is providing Ukraine with some weapons, but not the heavier equipment it needs to launch serious offensives against Russian forces. It takes time to educate Ukrainian troops to operate tanks or aircrafts, as well as to set up the supply lines and logistics centers necessary to operate them within Ukraine. So this might alter if the fight continues for a year or longer. Ukraine's chances of successfully repelling Russia's invasion and pushing them back to their own borders are low. However, Ukraine could make the conflict so painful for Russia that it agrees to a settled peace, with the currently occupied territories being part of the price for continued Ukrainian independence. In either case, though, peace is unlikely unless Ukraine abandons its constitutional amendment that enshrines NATO membership directly into the constitution and reaffirms its commitment to absolute neutrality. Additional concessions may need to be made, such as the establishment of some type of veto authority by Russia over internal Ukrainian concerns, depending on how badly the conflict goes for Ukraine in the long run. Another option for Ukraine is a complete military victory against Russia, forcing the invading Russian forces back to their home bases in the separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. This seems the less likely of the two possibilities, but important details could change the outcome of the conflict significantly. Even though Ukraine suffers huge casualties of its own, it is being continuously resupplied by the West. In 6 months, Russia may be forced to try to throw 20th century weapons because it will be unprepared for the strong attacks that NATO or the West may launch against it if the resupply of heavy equipment and potentially even the transfer of Western hardware continues. But if the West continues to flood Ukraine with weapons, a nightmarish scenario that is more likely than we believe could unfold. Putin may see the use of nuclear weapons as his sole option if Russia suffers a series of crushing setbacks or if Ukraine receives substantial quantities of heavy Western equipment. As Ukraine has no nuclear weapons, Russia has little to worry about if it uses these weapons. In a show of support for Ukraine, President Joe Biden of the United States has said that this is a red line for him and that the United States will respond appropriately if Russia uses WMDs inside of Ukraine. Regardless, the increasing lethality of modern chemical and biological weapons would transform Ukraine into a hellscape comparable to Central Europe in 1916. Regardless of the way the future of Ukraine unfolds, one thing is certain. It will take years, if not decades, for the country to recover from the war. As a result of Russian barrages that targeted populations without discrimination, several cities have suffered partial or whole destruction. It will require a significant amount of time, energy, and resources to reconstruct these cities. The nation of Ukraine will, in due time, recover thanks to all of the benefits that it is currently experiencing. To what extent, however, Ukraine will continue to function as a state-free client in the Soviet style, that is something that has to be seen. What do you want to see next? Leave us a comment below and never forget to subscribe to the channel.